Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and today, the only thing we're talking about is this guy over here, Maxx Crosby, number 98. So before I get into today's show, which is going to ruffle some feathers today, it is what it is, I want an honest comment down below, and I want your opinion of what you think about Maxx Crosby. It could be anything, any opinion whatsoever. My opinion on Maxx Crosby is this. I think he is the definition of a Raider. And when I think about somebody putting on that silver and black, somebody rocking that album, to me, Maxx Crosby is everything that you look for in a Raider. But to me, is this. We always say that nobody is above the shield. And I think sometimes we're afraid to talk about that topic when it comes to Maxx Crosby. But coming up here on today's show, I'm going to tell you this. Because I believe in the idea that no player is above the shield, a trade involving Maxx Crosby is more possible now and more possible this offseason than it has ever been before. And that's coming from me, a guy that has literally made multiple videos saying that Maxx Crosby is never going to get traded by the Las Vegas Raiders. And the reason why we're talking about this is because of what Maxx Crosby said himself. So here is why Maxx could be traded this offseason, and it's an actual possibility. The Raiders are going to move on from Antonio Pierce. They were 100% going to move on from AP unless Mike Vrabel says no to the job. But Maxx also wants stability in this organization, and I can't blame him for wanting stability in this organization. But I can blame him because he also was a part of the regime or part of the players that wanted AP here in the first place. But this is what Maxx Crosby said. You might have missed it during the holidays. Years of inconsistency. New coaches every other year. New teammates. And there have been plenty of times where I'm like, damn, like this D-line is cold. And then I come back and every single one of them is gone. It's like, what the... You could put the reference in there. I know Maxx likes Antonio Pierce. I know a lot of the Raiders players like Antonio Pierce. He is a likable guy. Hell, I know if I had a head coach like AP, I bet you I would rally behind somebody like that as well. But one of the things that Maxx really, truly wants this offseason is stability for the first time. And like a lot of Raider fans, we want stability too. But if the Raiders are unable to prove to Maxx Crosby that they're going to have stability or that they're not going to bring in the right head coach, Maxx is at least going to consider potentially moving on. Let's look at another reason why Maxx could be traded this offseason. He is sick and tired of losing. I'm sick and tired of losing. You're sick and tired of losing. I know for a fact the Mad Max, the Condor, is definitely sick and tired of losing. You know how I know? He literally said that he's sick and tired of losing. It's tough, bro, because I feel for Myles Garrett because he's in the exact same boat. This is also going back to what Maxx was answering some questions about potentially being dealt, potentially about his offseason, potentially what he's looking forward to. And since the Raiders went out and drafted 98 in the 4th round out of Eastern Michigan, they are 40-55. 2021 is the only winning season that Maxx Crosby has ever been a part of. And let's face it, the last 3 years have been an absolute disaster. 2022, Derek Carr's final year, the Josh McDaniels first year, disaster. 2023, disaster. This season, I think could go down as one of the worst seasons in Raiders history just based on how the entire thing went from start all the way down to finish. I do not blame Maxx for wanting stability. I do not blame for Maxx wanting to win games. But what I don't want to see is people freaking out over this video. All I'm simply saying is there is at least a chance that it could happen because Crosby is frustrated with how bad the Raiders are. And he is having his worst season ever. Now, I think you could also say that when you look at some of the injuries that he had to play through a few things, didn't play in many games, the Raiders had lost a lot of players. All of these things go into that consideration. However, and coming up here on the show, we're going to get into the biggest reason of why Maxx could be dealt. And those first two reasons are very important, no doubt about it. But this next reason coming up here on the show, I mean, it is by far the biggest reason, and the Raiders are going to have a really difficult decision to make. Do you pay Maxx Crosby, or do you try to look at, I don't know, maybe paying a quarterback? We'll get into all that here in just a moment, but today's show is sponsored by Z-Biotics. And let's face it, holiday season sometimes kicks your butt. I love hanging out with my family and friends, but I also like a good drink here or there. And let's face it, after a night of drinks, we don't bounce back maybe like we used to in our old college days. And I can either have a great night or a great next day. That is until I found Z-Biotics pre-alcohol. Pre-alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to drink this probiotic before drinking alcohol. Drink responsibly and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. I'm talking about Thanksgiving feast and New Year's Eve celebrations. This holiday season is packed with events, but don't let the festivities leave you feeling less than merry or jolly. ZBiotics' pre-alcohol probiotic can help you savor the night and seize the next day. So stay in the loop and go to zbiotics.com/chatsports. You can also scan the QR code on screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use code chatsports at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription by using the code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guaranteed. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/chatsports and use code chatsports at checkout for 15% off. Thank you to ZBiotics for sponsoring this episode of the Raiders Report, and hopefully the good times keep it rolling. Now, I know there's no good times if we trade Maxx Crosby, and I know that that's going to scare some people, but he does want a brand new deal. And this wasn't really something that I thought was going to pop up on our radar this year. I thought it was something that could potentially pop up on the radar next season, but Maxx has made it very clear. He wants a new contract, and if the Raiders are unwilling to give him a new deal, you could see him actually test the open market, and this is why this is the most likely that we have ever been in a situation where Maxx could actually be dealt. So Maxx on his new contract. I have no more guaranteed money. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of things that need to be talked about, and I'm looking forward to those conversations. It's going to be awesome. If you don't know what the contract looks like here around Crosby, his cap numbers for the next 2 seasons are 28.2, 24.8 mil. Here's the thing, though. The no guaranteed. Maxx wants some guaranteed money over the next 2 seasons on his contract. The issue kind of is, and maybe it's not an issue, it could be a solution, which we'll get to here in a moment. He does have 3 void years from 2027 to 2029 on the Raiders. So no matter what, even if he's not on the team, he's going to be on the books for the Raiders in 2027, 2028, 2029. The reason is because they tried to offload some of his money. They tried to give him a little bit more money. They've restructured his contract already a few times, and that has led to the void years. So to me, what do I got to do here? If I don't want the Raiders to trade away Maxx Crosby, and I don't want the Raiders to trade away Maxx, I know a lot of people are going to be like, here we go, Mitch wants the Raiders to trade Maxx again. Reminder, my job is to talk about topics, to talk about trending things, and if Maxx says what he does, and he did, Maxx said a lot of very, very interesting things over the holidays, and it raised my interest. But in no means do I want him to be traded. What I am going to talk about, though, is what this contract needs to potentially look like so Maxx doesn't ask for a trade to begin with. So to make sure that you don't miss any information around Maxx Crosby this offseason, this is the most interesting offseason revolving 98 that we have ever had and we are ever going to experience. And I think it's going to be very important to see what the Raiders do around Maxx, because I think it could lead to a lot of rumors, a lot of tea leaves, a lot of smoke around what this team could do this offseason. And I promise you this, you're not going to find anybody out there that's going to give you the information as often as I do, like here on the Raiders Report. So make sure you're subscribed. So here is how I would do this thing. You could do it 2 different ways. The first way is you could rework his current deal. Think of it as like the way that the Rams reworked Aaron Donald's deal a few years ago, where they gave him a $40 million raise over 3 years. With the Raiders having only 2 years left on his contract with Maxx, the way that I would do it is this. I would say, Maxx, I'm going to give you 2 years, $70 million, fully guaranteed. So he's going to make $35 million in 2025, and he's going to make $35 million in 2026. It's technically a $17 million raise over 2 seasons, but it's fully guaranteed. I think also that the Raiders could offset the cap space on the remaining void years. So what do I mean? If you give them the $70 million guaranteed, you might not have to put it at a $35 million cap. If I'm Mark Davis, I go, all right, you want some guaranteed money? Here's some guaranteed money. Let me lower your cap space so that gives us a little bit more flexibility to be able to build around the team, and then that way you get your current money. But this is a deal that I would offer Maxx if he's unsure of his future with the Las Vegas Raiders. This is a deal if you're like, all right, let's lock in for 2 years, let's go from there. And what I would want the Raiders to do is to offer him a 3-year contract extension to try to take advantage of those void years. So you already have the 2 years that he's on the books for, right? Which you can see at that bottom line. That base salary would be $28.2 mil, $24.8 million in the 2 years. However, though, after that, it's a little bit of a higher contract at $40.6 million for 3 seasons. Essentially, you're giving Maxx Crosby the highest paid deal at any NFL position that's basically not a quarterback, right? You're giving him the highest paid edge rusher deal. Right now, Nick Bosa makes $34 million per year. Based on what I think is going to happen, whether you think Max is better than Nick Bosa or not, and I think if you asked a lot of NFL GMs, they probably would take Bosa over Mad Max. I've said it before, I would take the Condor over any defensive player in the league because of what he represents for this team, and Max knows that. So what his agent is going to ask for is a bigger deal than what Nick Bosa got, and that is a 5-year, $175 million deal with $125 million guaranteed. Again, this is a projection, but it's how I would try to get Max to sign a longer-term deal to make sure that we're keeping him for the 5 years that we know that we can potentially keep him. That's what I'm trying to do. Make sure Maxx Crosby stays a Raider for life. So one more thing here before we get out of here of why Max could be traded. I don't want to say that he already said goodbye because that's stretching a little bit. But in years past, it's always been, I'm going to be a Raider, I'm going to be a Raider, I'm going to be a Raider. And that's what all Max has always said, right? Like, we've never really, don't get me wrong, he flirted with the idea of being traded last offseason if the Raiders didn't hire Antonio Pierce. But that was to get his head coach to this team. Every other conversation around a trade has been, nah, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. But when Maxx Crosby talked about the offseason just a few days ago, it didn't really sound like that. And he said, I'm looking forward to this offseason and the process, and I will say on top of it, the Raider fans have been dope as it's shit, and I love them to death. Like, that's one thing. Through everything, the fans have truly, since day one, embraced me being in their corner. I think it's the dopest shit. Like, even with the injuries and all this shit, the support has been the coolest shit ever. Yeah, there is so many things that got to be talked about, so it's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. The only reason why I'm bringing up that quote is because it just seems a little bit different. And the reason that so many people are freaking out about what Max said is because it's kind of going against everything that Max has said in the past, and we know how crazy this offseason could be. But when you really, really listen to everything that Maxx Crosby said, you gotta actually look at yourself in the mirror and go, there is at least a chance that he could be traded. So is Maxx Crosby going to get dealt this offseason? Is probably the main reason why you clicked on this video. He threatened to be traded last offseason if the Raiders didn't hire Antonio Pierce. That needs to be put in consideration. Crosby clearly wants to win, and he wants a new deal. If he doesn't think that he can win, or if the Raiders aren't going to give him a new deal, he will at least entertain the idea of being traded. And if the Raiders can't prove to Max that they're actually serious about winning with some of the salary cap space they have, with some of the things that they're going to do at head coach, at quarterback, then he could ask to leave. So ultimately, I know this, that Mark Davis and Max have a great relationship. Mark doesn't want Max to leave. Max doesn't want to leave. I was told by a very reliable source that it's obviously unlikely that Max is traded, but it is not impossible. This is somebody who's told me in the past that a Maxx Crosby trade is never going to happen. So for me, I'm sitting up here going, all right, yeah, obviously unlikely, but it's not impossible. Crosby wants to be a Raider for life, but he also wants to win a Super Bowl. He's in the prime of his career, and he's got $0 million guaranteed. Bottom line, if the Raiders want to keep Max, they will. If the Raiders don't want to keep Maxx Crosby, well, then a trade could be up in the air. So I'll tell you this is how I'm going to end the show. I never thought it was ever going to be possible that Maxx Crosby would play for another NFL team. But after his comments and after everything that I said on today's show, I think that it's more possible than ever before.